Hello again from Kentucky, Tennessee Living. My name is David, and my wife Joanna and I are the co-founders of this channel. And in the introductory video, I told you that I wanted to talk about the Killing Rock. And while that is still true, I've decided that we need to do a whole series of these videos covering the more than 900 videos that we have on our YouTube channel, covering everything from the Civil War to Jenkins, Kentucky, the Hatfield-McCoy feuds, the Mountain feuds, Appalachian legends, just all kinds of things we have on the channel itself. And we would appreciate it if you would go check those out when you finish watching this video. But I've decided to call these series of videos Coffee Time Chats. And this one is about the Killing Rock. Specifically, I want to answer two questions about our Killing Rock series. And before we go any further, I want to tell you this is my co-star, Fancy. She thinks she has to be anywhere that I am. And also, you'll notice that I'm stiff. That's because I had a neck injury and my body don't regulate temperature very well, and so that's why I'm wearing a jacket, and that's why I'm wearing a glove on my left hand, because I get cold. But anyway, going back to the Killing Rock, I think we should start out with a question/accusation that we always get about our videos on the Killing Rock. We started out to tell a short story about the Killing Rock, basically just rehashing what you can find on basically any website. It's something that my wife says that she had dreams about for years. And when we started, she knew that the Fleming brothers were her relations. I knew that Dr. Taylor was my relations. I was told that he was my uncle. And up until we started this series, I always thought that he was my uncle, and he is on my father's side. But on my mother's side, Dr. Taylor is actually my great-great-great-grandfather. I didn't know that until we started doing the video. We started trying to tell the story. As I said, we started out sort of simple. I was finishing up a video, the Jenkins, Kentucky video. I had recorded it, and I was piecing together the photos with the narration. And my wife was recording a version of the Killing Rock video, which one of our first versions of it. And because we try to be as accurate as we can, she had got as much source material as she could gather together. This was in 2013, so 11 years ago. And while she's reading this story that she had cobbled together from about 10 different versions of the story, and she was trying to piece them together in a way that the story was linear and that it was cohesive, because a lot of times the telling of the story jumps around a bit. And while she was doing that, I kept stopping her. And the reason that I kept stopping her is because I have a very analytic mind. I tend to think very critically. It's something that my father drilled into me from an early age. And I have an eidetic memory. A lot of people confuse that with a photographic memory, but it's not. Basically, I'll pick up something that's said or I read here, and then something here, something totally different, will say something that my mind will piece together with the story that was told over here. And so she's reading what she had put together. And I kept stopping her and I'd say, wait a minute. Didn't you just say that this? And then I would ask her a couple of questions about it and she would answer it. But then I got hung up on Jane Mullins because she was talking about Jane, and I'm like, well, wait a minute. Everything you're saying about Jane contradicts itself. What's going on there? And so she showed me her source material, and I was looking at it. And come to find out, there is two Jane Mullinses. One of them was supposedly a mistress of Doc Taylor, and that he had had a child with. And the other, of course, is the Jane Mullins from the story. But there was 3 different birth dates. And then there was also, Jane Mullins had another name, Amanda Jane Mullins. And the stories that said Amanda Jane Mullins had a different year for the birth date. The other 2 Jane Mullinses had the same year, but different months. And I thought, well, this is weird. What's going on here? And so we started digging into this, and we kept on hitting a wall with it, kept on hitting a wall, kept on hitting a wall. And it actually, about a year later, we had gotten access to the census records. And I looked at the 1870 census, because the 1880 census was a Civil War census. And the only thing that they took census of that year was the soldiers from both the North and the South, who they were, what side they fought on and all this, and they built a pension plan for the veterans of both sides from that census. So there was the 1890 census, and then the 1870 census. And it was in the 1870 census that I found Jane living in the house with her mother, her father, and her brother. This was before she got married to Wilson. And according to the census, her name was not Amanda Jane Mullins. Her name was Amoda Jane Mullins. Now, the interesting thing about that was, according to the often told story, Jane has a daughter. And depending on which version of the story, her daughter's name is Amarinda. Or she might be called Mindy, or she may be called America. And it's like, okay, so 2 women, but there's only 1 daughter. And according to all versions, America, Mindy, and Amarinda has the same birthday. Same date, same birthday. Same date, down to the month and the day. So, after I found the fact that Jane Mullins' name was actually Amarinda, I was able to find her death record. And I was able to find her grave. And so all this information about Jane Mullins started falling into place. Come to find out, there was 2 sisters. One of them's name was Amanda Mullins, The other one's name was Jane Mullins. Now, these two were sisters, and they were born 2 years apart. Then there was Amoda Jane Mullins, the sister of Ira, the wife of Wilson. And so when we found this out, we discovered that Jane Mullins was actually murdered. According to her family and according to all the stories, she died in childbirth. And that's another thing that didn't make sense about this story, because supposedly Heenan Fleming had confessed to the Killing Rock. But then Jane Mullins had died in childbirth, and when they brought Heenan back to Wise County, they had a trial, but without Jane's testimony, they couldn't find him guilty. As it turns out, that's not correct, and we'll go into that later. But so now I was able to find out who Jane Mullins was, and after I found out who she was, I found out that shortly after being released from protective custody, she had married another man. And like I said, there were just things that started popping into place all over the place. And then we came across Charles Johnson's book. This was probably about July of 2015. I know in October of 2015, I had an MRI on my neck, and I was supposed to see a neurologist on the 26th of November. And they were pretty sure that I was going to have surgery on my neck, and that's why I'm stiff. And so I started rushing out everything that I could in preparation for this surgery, because they said that I may end up paraplegic, quadriplegic, or I may end up dead. And so I turned everything over to Joanna, and so she started the process of learning the software to do the videos. And I had the surgery. But after the surgery, I started digging more and more into this story, finding newspaper articles. You would not believe the number of newspaper articles that Joanna and I have read from all over the country about the Killing Rock. We looked into everything that we could. Charles Johnson provided us a lot of breadcrumbs that allowed us to find other people that was connected to the story. And it was actually something that Charles Johnson says in his book that inspired us to do the story that we did and the way that we did it. And basically, Charles Johnson says that the reason that he wrote down this story about the Killing Rock was so that the younger generations would know why there were so many questions going on about the Killing Rock. Now, this was in 1838, or I'm sorry, 1938. And Charles Johnson says in his book that when the Killing Rock happened, he had just started his career as a court reporter, working for the county clerk's office. And so Charles Johnson was intimate with this story. And he asks a couple questions when he gets the transcript. You know, he starts out telling the story, then he gets the transcript, and he's so excited that he's got this transcript, but then he asks these questions. He asks the questions, basically, do you think that Doc Taylor received a fair trial? Fair trial? Do you think that the Supreme Court was justified in not granting him a new trial? And there was a couple other things he said too that really got us to looking into this really good. And so I read through the transcript probably a dozen times, and Joanna had read through it a few times, maybe a dozen as well. But after reading through this transcript so many times, we started noticing that there was contradictions in the official transcript from the court. There was contradictions, and then there was a question that was asked and an answer given, but that question shouldn't have been asked unless the defense had asked a question. And so that didn't make any sense. And Charles Johnson had said something else about it as well. And I can't remember exactly what he says about it. But basically, I believe that he implies that that the transcript had been altered. That this didn't match up with what he knew from the trial. He tells us that the copy that he had came from the Court of Appeals, and that it was the only known copy in existence, because for some reason the courthouse in Wise had lost the transcript of the trial. This is very odd. It can happen, but it's just very odd. But then Charles Johnson tells some stories about the Killing Rock that we knew and he would know was totally false. For instance, he tells the story about Doc Taylor being on guard duty at the Todd Hall trial and how he sneaks off to go kill the Mullins family at the Pound Gap Massacre. The problem with that is that the Pound Gap Massacre occurred in May of 1892, but Todd Hall's trial was in February of 1892. And so how could Doc Taylor sneak off from guard duty to go kill the Mullins family when it was 2 months, 3 months later? And so these things didn't make sense. And so we started digging even more, reading in newspaper articles, court records. We looked into laws at the time about how things were done, with the exceptions of the court, stuff like that. And basically, we researched this story for well over 10 years. Personal research that Joanna had done, personal research that I had done, and then the research that we did together. And so we knew something wasn't right about the story. And so we set out like Charles Johnson, and we wanted to document everything that we could find about the Killing Rock. But we wanted to point out what was wrong with the transcript of the trial compared to what we knew from newspaper articles and other sources. And how the transcript of the trial skips over some things but comes back to others. And so, just like Charles Johnson, we wanted everybody to know why that there's been questions about the Killing Rock for well over 130 years. And so that's why we chose to do the format that we did. And the final question for today, the final thing we'll close this video up with, is that often we get messages from people, and either direct message or on comments, that we must think that Doc Taylor is innocent because of the way we've told the story and how we question everything. And I want to tell you right now, you can go through all, I think it's 44 or 45 videos that we have. Well over 7 hours, almost 8 hours of video on the subject. And we never once state that Doc Taylor or the Fleming brothers were innocent. We never once state that they were guilty either. And the whole thing is actually complicated. And we often tell people that if you listen to our story and you think that we're saying that he's innocent, that's because we have given you enough information that now you're questioning whether or not he was guilty or innocent. Has nothing to do with us. We haven't said one way or another. And so if you think that our video says that he's innocent, it's because you too think critically. You've went through our videos and your mind is telling you that there's something wrong with the trial and he was innocent. A lot of people read the same thing and say, well, he was guilty. I don't care what you say, he was guilty. Like I said, we never said he was innocent, never said he was guilty. We're just giving you as much information about it as we can. Personally, we think it's one of the greatest mysteries, murder mysteries, that's ever occurred in the mountains. I mean, the Killing Rock, Pound Gap Massacre, is a murder mystery that Agatha Christie couldn't write. Sherlock Holmes would have been hard, Arthur Conan Doyle would have been hard pressed to write this as a Sherlock Holmes video or book. And so that's where we're at on it. Like I said, we've never said he's guilty. We've never said he's innocent. If you've decided that, then congratulations, you think critically, and we've given you enough information that now you, like people for 130 years, are now questioning what actually happened at the Killing Rock on May 14th, 1892. If you've made it to the end of this video, I want to thank you. And I thank you for supporting Kentucky, Tennessee Living. If you have any questions other than what we went over today, you can comment on this video and ask us questions. We encourage you to like and subscribe and make comments, because all those things, it's something little for you, but it actually helps us out because it tells YouTube that people are interested in our content, and so they offer our content to more people. Like I said, it's not much, but it helps us to bring you more stories. And again, I want to thank you for supporting Kentucky, Tennessee Living. Oh, also, you should be able to find a post on our Facebook page and in our Facebook group, Kentucky, Tennessee Living, about this series of videos where you can ask questions and we'll do our best to answer them. If multiple people ask the same question, we'll say a lot of people ask this question, or we may say Glenn from Jenkins wants to know X. And so we'll give you credit for the question. But like I said, we would appreciate any feedback that you can give us on this video, on our Killing Rock videos, or any of the videos that we do. And again, thank you for supporting Kentucky, Tennessee Living. And you have a wonderful evening or morning. Have a good day.